Hey guys, so today we learned about factoring with the greatest common factor. Um, and so I'm going to do problem 6 from your homework assignment 7.1. So here we go. The first thing we want to do when we're looking at factoring is figure out what the greatest common factor is, if there is one. So if we look at the coefficients here, we have 16 or negative 16, 24, and negative 32. So we're trying to think of what number goes into all of those numbers. And if you weren't sure just off the top of your head, you could start listing factors for each of those numbers. So for this one, it's fairly easy to notice that 8 goes into each of these. But if you weren't sure, you could think, okay, what goes into 16? Well, we have 1 and 16. We have 2 and 8, and there's nothing, it's not divisible by 3. We got 4 and 4, not divisible by 5. And so you can keep thinking about things like that. And then we got 24, so 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. 5 doesn't go into it, and then we kind of start going backwards there, switching things around. So those are all the factors of 24. And then we can look at 32. So we have 1 and 32, 2 and 16. Doesn't go. 3 doesn't go into it. We have 4 and 8. 5 doesn't go into it. 6 doesn't go into it. So we can kind of stop there. Okay. So looking between all three of these lists, 8 is the biggest number that they all have. They each have an 8. So 8 is the greatest common factor amongst the integers. So 8 is part of our greatest common factor. Then we start looking at the p's. They all have a p in them. So we know we can take out at least one of those. And so we're looking for the lowest power of p, the biggest amount that they all have in common though. So this one has a p cubed, this one has p squared, and this one has p to the 4th. That means they all have at least a p squared in them, so p squared is our greatest common factor amongst those. Now we have to look at the q's. This has a q squared, this one has a q cubed, and this one has a q to the 1st power. So between these three, our q to the 1st power is the one that they all have in common. So that is part of our greatest common factor. So here's our greatest common factor. So we found that, and now we need to factor using our greatest common factor. So we're not done just at this step. From here, we have to figure out what we would multiply by this in order to get our original equation, or our original expression. So in order to do that, we just have to take each individual term and divide it by this. We see what's left over if we divide this away. So we just divide each thing individually by this. So negative 16 divided by 8 is negative 2. P cubed divided by p squared is p. And q squared divided by q is q. Because when we divide, we just subtract the powers. Then we have 24 divided by 8 is 3. P squared divided by p squared is 1, because they cancel out. And q to the 3rd power divided by q is q squared. Then we do negative 32 divided by 8, and that is 4, or negative 4. P to the 4th divided by p squared is p squared, since we just subtract the powers. And q divided by q cancels out. It's just 1. And there we go. So this is our expression factored using our greatest common factor of 8p squared q.